بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا ربنا زدنا علما وتقوى واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وثبت أقدامنا، لقد ظلمنا أنفسنا ولغافل لذنوب العند، فنتوجه إليك ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. We're at the 10th point of wisdom, in which Imam Ibn Atta'illah says, وروض الفقات عياد المريدين. So he's saying that the occasions in which need and poverty are manifest are the celebrations of those who are aiming for the pleasure of Allah wa ta'ala, the murideen. In the commentary, it says that these days are days of celebration and happiness, and this is the opposite of what we may think at face value. So here, it appears that what is being talked about are experiences, not little poverty, but experiences in which our poverty is demonstrated, in which everything that we depend on is shown to be useless. Every created thing is shown to be useless in dealing with the reality that we are in need of Allah. That Allah huwa al-ghani wa nahnu al-fuqara. That Allah is the self-sufficient and we are the ones that are deficient and have want, and we are dependent upon Allah wa ta'ala. So he says that the happiness of the people that are seeking the pleasure of Allah, they look at the moments of life in this regard, in which the moments of life in which they're going through trial and tribulation, and the reality of life is showing that they have to depend on Allah. They look at those times as times of celebration and happiness, because the truth of Tawheed and the relationship between the Creator and the Created is manifest. On the other hand, the person that finds celebration in food and in clothing and in wealth and worldly honors, the happiness of the selected servants of Allah, those who have established a true bond with Allah, is the denial of the ego and their desires. When the objects of desire of ego are denied to it, then this is the beginning of the feasting point. This is the beginning of the feasting point. So poverty is in conflict with the desire of the ego. Poverty here is not literal poverty, because we know that the deen encourages not to be in a state of dependency upon human beings. And that's what a state of poverty would mean. But here is the state in which we are clear that nothing can come to our aid except Allah wa ta'ala. And then he says, رُبَّمَا وَجَدْتَ مِنَ الْمَزِيدِ فِي الْفَاقِةِ مَا لَا تَجِدُوهُ فِي الصَّوْمِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. It's possible that you will encounter, or you would find, that which is beneficial to you in these states, what you would not find even in fasting and in salah itself. So here the idea is that the situations of life in which we find ourselves calling out to Allah in pure need, like Yunus, the Prophet ﷺ, in which we are acknowledging that nothing can come to our aid except Allah, and that we have harmed ourselves. So this is the basis for enlightenment in gaining insight, and is rooted in the denial of desires of the ego. Therefore, if the ritual prayer and fasting are executed after the desires of the ego have been satisfied, as in breaking the fast with delicious food or performing the ritual prayer in extravagantly fine garments, then in such prayer and fast there will not be such abundance of inner illumination and spiritual insights as would cascade into the hearts at the time of starvation during conditions that are in conflict with the ego, with the desire. Then he says, Al-faqatu busutu al-muwahibi. Al-faqatu busutu al-muwahibi. So these states of need are the expansion of gifts that are given to one. And here is translated, the states of need are gift-laden carpets. So during these periods of starvation, the carpet is filled with gifts in the form of inner illuminations, gnosis, or insight. And those who are selected by Allah wa ta'ala are not scared by poverty and starvation. On the contrary, their happiness is boundless in this state. This is a very interesting point with regard to how we look at life. That trials and tribulations are embraced and looked at as opportunities to purify our hearts in relation to Allah wa ta'ala. So this language that's being used is a language in which we acknowledge who Allah is and who we are. إن أردت ورود المواهب عليك صححه الفقرة والألفاقة لديك. And then he quotes from the Quran, إنما الصدقات للفقراء. If you want charity to come your way, then you have to correct your state of poverty before Allah wa ta'ala. Because the receiving of sadaqah is for the fuqara, is for those that are in need. They qualify to receive sadaqah or gifts. So here he's using the language of the Quran, and he's utilizing some ta'wilat, some interpretations, or this is kind of the tafsiri shari. Tafsiri shari is that we're looking at some points that are indicated to in the ayat of the Quran, and these points may not be in the literal meaning, but in the reality when you think about the state of the person that is in need. And when you look at the Sharia says that that person that is in need qualifies for sadaqah. So here, the understanding is not on the material level, but on the spiritual level. It says the attribute of want and need is poverty. Cultivation of poverty thus means to cultivate the attribute of need and want in relation to the Master, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dependence must be on Allah at all times. The heart should not develop independence on account of worldly possessions. The human's heart should not feel satisfied and independent because you have wealth and children. Independence of the heart should be only by virtue of that relationship which we have with Allah. If one desires the torrents of divine effulgence to rain down on one, then one must become wholly dependent on Allah wa ta'ala. There's this discussion of Tawheed and Tawakkul, dependency upon Allah wa ta'ala, and belief in the oneness of Allah wa ta'ala that sometimes takes place. And so here, the reality of the situation is that the clearest way to gain maybe some insight into this is exactly what has been said, that times of hardship show us the reality of how much we're dependent upon Allah wa ta'ala. So these moments should be embraced. And in these moments, we're going to find the sweetness of faith and the light of guidance. The light of guidance on how to deal with the situation. It's not easy, because then what we're experiencing and feeling, that which can be overwhelming, has to be overcome, or we have to be still in that moment. And it's like if we're on a boat or on a ship in the sea, and there's torrential rains, storms are coming, the waters are wild and uncontrollable. And we have to be able to ride out that moment until we get to safety, having confidence that we will make it through and having dependence that will make it through. If one is in a ship that's quite well protected and durable and strong, then one has confidence that one can make it along the path and the way. If one has security and emergency provisions, one feels a little more secure. And Iman is supposed to be like that. That what gets us along the way is our relationship with Allah. It's our ship, it's the Ark of Nuh, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's the Ark of Nuh, which allows us to traverse the reality of life. So we will only begin to take gain from the spiritual life when that poverty is there. Then we will be qualified to receive those gifts. And I want to end with this. There's a few more, but we kind of overlapped on the things that have already that are being said now. But there's a last point. And in the past, when I was reading this subsequent hikam to the main one, or the subsequent point of wisdom that kind of supports the 10th, the main point of wisdom, which regards poverty, that the feast days of those who are travelers on the path are when they are in a state of need. The last one, it says, do not stretch out your hand. لا تمدن يدك إلى الأخذ من الخلائق إلا أن ترى أن المعطي فيهم مولاك إن كنت كذلك فخذ ما وفقك العلم. Do not stretch out your hands to the creation, to those creatures that are in your orbit, unless you see that the giver among them is your Rabb, is your Lord in this case, right? And so if such is the case, then take what knowledge says is suitable for you. O servant of Allah, gifts awarded to you by people may be accepted on two conditions. Firstly, you have received such a state of spiritual elevation that you firmly believe that the actual giver is Allah. Right? That's important. Rather, the state of your heart should be such that you consciously feel that the creation is not the giver under any circumstances. The gaze of your heart should be on Allah and not on the creatures in this regard, so that you don't gain dependency on them. Secondly, when you have imbued in yourself the aforementioned condition, then accept the gift according to your outer and inner knowledge. Outer knowledge refers to the sacred law. In other words, if it permits acceptance of the gift, accept it. Otherwise, refrain. For example, if the gift is presented to one by a person whose earnings are unlawful, then refrain from accepting it. Inner knowledge refers to the knowledge of your inner condition, what's going on within yourself. If you have need for the object presented, accept only what you need and leave the excess. If, however, it is your intention to give the excess to others, you may accept it. Moreover, do not accept something that you have abandoned in the process of training your ego for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending it to you by way of a trial. Moreover, do not accept something that you have abandoned in the process of training your ego. Do not accept the gifts of proud people and those who advertise their favors. Similarly, do not accept a gift from such a person whose presentation of a gift produces pressure on your heart for some reason. The reality here is that in this point of wisdom, we're being taught how to free ourselves from dependency upon people, and more so the emotional dependency, and how to make our emotions depend on Allah. That's a heavy task. He got to the point of even analyzing how it is that things come our way. And sometimes it's in the small things that come our way that we find ourselves in trouble. You know, the politician has that issue. Small gifts here and there, so on and so forth. Then after a while, it accumulates, and then that person becomes enslaved to those who have given the gifts. So here, the reality is teaching us to examine, it appears to be, what is our state, what is our inner condition as we receive things from the world. Not just from people that may be proud or people that may throw it in your face, so to speak, what they give you. But in general, even when it comes to the issue of your rizq, in the more general sense, like your work, everything that you have comes from Allah wa ta'ala. So we're tested in that reality of depending upon Allah and acknowledging that the source of our rizq is with Allah. Now, ironically, that's a good portion of the discussion, the issue of rizq coming to us and how we should deal with rizq, or how we should deal with provision or things that come our way. But deeper is the state of need, state of poverty. And that can cover not only material things, but also our emotions and emotional dependency upon people. So emotional dependency, we can maybe read it into this point that many of us, when we feel these states of emotional dependence, that we direct ourselves to Allah. Because with emotional dependency comes distorted ways of seeing people and over-exaggerating their role in our lives, and also twisted perception of events at times, where we begin to look at people in a bad way because we're overly emotionally dependent upon them, and then what we want from them is not what we get. So the reality of wanting, instead of depending on a person to fulfill what is our needs, we turn to Allah. We turn to Allah. That doesn't mean that people in our circle of relationships, like family and in more intimate relationships, shouldn't be expected to do certain things. We have a system of rights and responsibilities in Islam. But sometimes we go overboard and we put ourselves in a position of over dependence on people to the extent where we begin to destroy ourselves, because emotionally it's impossible that a human being is going to fulfill all of our needs, or it's impossible that we're going to get all of our needs met in the world, because we have a habit of turning wants into needs. And so not everything that we want, that we turned into a need, we're going to get in this world. It actually could be problematic. So in this point of wisdom, there's a lot to be thought about. The reality of emotions depending upon people, the reality of how we look at what comes our way with regard to rizq, that it ultimately comes from Allah wa ta'ala versus people, and the reality of how it is that we respond when people are giving us things, or when we want things from people. Like, what's our inner condition in that regard? Some people drag themselves in a hole and they do humiliating things, or even things that are prohibited at a higher level. Because humiliating yourself is prohibited, but they do these things to get things that they want. And in that process, they never connect with people properly because they confuse the reality. They think that people are the source of things, and what ends up being the case is that they're never contented with what it is that they have. Because when you are humiliating yourself in the process, how can you be grateful? You become resentful. But when you realize that all good comes from Allah wa ta'ala, whether you deserve it or not, and you realize that emotionally you can truly depend upon Allah, and human beings have limitations, you begin to free yourself from want and desire and dependency on people and things. Allah knows best but this is something that came up in the reflection. The state of poverty. It's a state in which we celebrate, because in this state of poverty, we begin to realize that Allah Ta'ala is the one that's dependent upon, and we are dependent upon Allah. So when we talk about poverty here, we're talking about the state of need. The state of need. May Allah forgive us our sins and grant us insight and strengthen us on this path as we traverse through the world. And may our journey to the grave and across the Sirat, and may our journey to Barzakh and then across the Sirat be safe. And may our graves be spacious and comfortable. And may we find ourselves safe in Jannah. And may all those that we love be there as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.